The oldest person alive right now is Japanese. The second oldest. The third. In fact, Japan has more people over the age of 100 than any other nation on Earth. Over 90,000 centenarians walking around, cooking their own meals, tending their gardens, visiting their grandchildren. And here's what nobody tells you. Most of them don't go to the gym. Not once. Not ever. Everything the Western fitness industry has sold you, the HIIT classes, the protein shakes, the $200 sneakers, the gym memberships you stop using in February. None of it explains why a 94-year-old woman in Okinawa can outperform a 60-year-old in Chicago on nearly every biomarker of aging. Muscle retention, joint mobility, cognitive function, balance, cardiovascular output. She beats him consistently across population studies, across decades of data. And the difference is not genetics. A landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that genetics account for only about 25% of longevity. The other 75% is behavior. It's what you do with your body every single day. So the question isn't, what did the Japanese win in the genetic lottery? The question is, what are they doing every morning before breakfast that you are not? I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. 4 specific movements, not exercises in the way you think of exercises. Not reps, not sets, not a burn. Movements, practices, physical rituals that Japanese seniors have embedded into their daily lives for generations. And when you understand the physiology behind each one, what they actually do to your fascia, your lymphatic system, your mitochondria, your vestibular system, you will never look at aging the same way again. But first, I need to destroy a belief that is quietly killing people in the West. The belief that rest is recovery, that sitting still is neutral, that if you're not in pain, your body is fine. It's not. Every hour you spend sedentary, your body is doing something called glycation. Sugar molecules are literally bonding to your proteins, stiffening them, aging them at the molecular level. Your fascia, the connective tissue wrapping every muscle, every organ, every nerve in your body, begins to dehydrate and solidify like plastic wrap left in the sun. Your lymphatic system, which has no pump of its own, stalls completely. Waste products accumulate in your tissues. Inflammatory cytokines, the chemical messengers of cellular damage, build up without the movement-driven circulation that would normally clear them. And your mitochondria, the energy factories inside your cells, begin a process called fission, breaking apart into smaller, less efficient units that produce more oxidative stress and less usable energy per cell. All of this happens not because you exercised wrong, because you didn't move at all. Japanese seniors move constantly, gently, purposefully, and the 4 movements I'm about to walk you through are the physical backbone of why they live so long and feel so well doing it. But I also want you to understand something before we go further. These 4 movements are not isolated tricks. They are a system. Each one addresses a specific mechanism of physical aging, and together they cover nearly every major pathway through which the human body breaks down. By the time I've walked you through all 4, I want you to understand not just what to do, but exactly why each movement matters at the cellular level. Because when you understand the why, you don't skip the practice. You can't afford to. The first movement is something that has been practiced in Japan since the early 1900s. It's called Radio Taiso. And before you dismiss it because you've heard of it, stay with me, because most people describe it wrong, and that's why they miss what it's actually doing. Radio Taiso is a series of 13 coordinated movements done every morning, typically for about 10 to 15 minutes. It was introduced in Japan in 1928, modeled loosely on a program broadcast by a life insurance company in the United States. But the Japanese version evolved into something far more sophisticated and far more intentional. Today, over 27 million Japanese people do it daily. Schoolchildren do it before class. Office workers do it in parking lots. Factory workers do it at shift changes. And elderly people in rural towns, the ones we are really talking about here, do it in parks before the sun is fully up, in small groups, on the same patch of ground they've used for 40 years in all weather without exception. Here is what it's doing in the body. Radio Taso combines dynamic stretching through movement rather than static holds, with deep rhythmic breathing and full range of motion activation of every major joint system, from the cervical spine to the ankles. When you move a joint through its full range of motion consistently, you maintain the production of synovial fluid, the joint's natural lubricant and shock absorber. Synovial fluid doesn't just reduce friction, it carries nutrients to the cartilage, which has no direct blood supply. Cartilage is a vascular tissue. It receives everything it needs for maintenance and repair through the mechanical compression and decompression of joint movement. Sedentary joints stop receiving this nutrient delivery efficiently. That's why older people in the West often have that cracking, grinding sound in their knees and hips. It's not inevitable age-related deterioration. It's the physical consequence of joints that haven't been moved through their full range consistently enough to sustain cartilage nutrition. Japanese seniors who have done Radio Taso every morning for 50 years have been bathing their joint cartilage in synovial fluid every single day. The difference in outcomes is not miraculous, it's mechanical, but Radio Taso goes beyond the joints. The coordinated arm swings and trunk rotations it involves create what physiologists call a mechanical pumping effect on the lymphatic vessels running through the axillary region, the armpits, and through the thoracic duct running along the spine. Remember, your lymphatic system carries immune cells, removes metabolic waste from tissues, and monitors for pathogens. But unlike your cardiovascular system, it has no heart to pump it. It moves exclusively through muscle contraction and body movement. When you swing your arms in wide, rhythmic arcs and rotate your trunk through its full range of motion, you are squeezing and releasing lymphatic vessels in a wave pattern that drives lymph fluid upward toward the thoracic duct and into circulation. Radio Taso essentially acts as a full-body lymphatic pump performed every single morning. Your immune system is activated before you've had breakfast. Metabolic waste that accumulated in your interstitial tissues overnight during sleep gets cleared. Inflammatory compounds produced by 8 hours of relative stillness get mobilized and transported toward elimination. The breathing component is equally important and equally underestimated. The deep, controlled exhales that accompany Radio Taso movements stimulate the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body, running from your brainstem down through your heart, lungs, and gut, innervating nearly every major organ along the way. Vagus nerve activation shifts your nervous system from sympathetic dominance, the stress response, the fight-or-flight state characterized by elevated cortisol, constricted blood vessels, elevated heart rate, and suppressed digestion and immune function, toward parasympathetic dominance, the rest, digest, and repair state in which cell maintenance, immune surveillance, and tissue regeneration occur. Starting your day with high vagal tone means lower cortisol, not just in the morning, but throughout the day. Because cortisol follows a diurnal rhythm that is shaped significantly by your physiological state in the first hours after waking. Lower cortisol means less chronic inflammation. Less chronic inflammation means slower telomere shortening, the progressive erosion of the protective caps on your DNA that is the most direct biological clock we have identified for cellular aging. This is not metaphor. This is mechanism, and it begins with 13 simple movements in a park at dawn. One more thing about Radio Taso before we move on, and this is something the research has only recently started to quantify: the social dimension. In Japan, Radio Taso is overwhelmingly practiced in groups. Neighbors, friends, community members, even strangers, gathering at the same time in the same place. Social connection activates the same vagal pathways that breathing and movement do. The combination of synchronized movement, rhythmic breathing, and social presence creates a neurochemical environment. Elevated oxytocin, elevated serotonin, reduced cortisol, reduced inflammatory markers that no solo treadmill session can replicate. When you see those groups of elderly Japanese men and women moving together in the morning light. You are watching one of the most sophisticated anti-aging protocols ever developed, and they think they're just doing their morning exercises. And here is the foreshadowing I want you to hold onto. One of the four movements I'm going to describe later is connected to this same vagal pathway, but it works through a completely different entry point in the body, one that most people in the West never think to address, buried deep in the connective tissue of your hips and your breathing muscles. Keep watching. The second movement takes us to a practice that has nothing to do with exercise culture and everything to do with functional architecture. In Japan, especially in traditional homes and rural areas, people regularly lower themselves to the floor and rise again throughout the day. They sit on tatami mats for meals. They sleep on futons they fold and store each morning. They garden from a deep squat. They pray in a kneeling position called seiza. They drink tea seated on the floor. They play with grandchildren at ground level. These are not workout choices. They are the natural consequence of a living environment that was never designed around chairs. And Western medicine has almost entirely missed how consequential this is. A study published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology followed more than 2,000 adults between the ages of 51 and 80 for over 6 years. Participants were tested on what researchers called the sitting-rising test, the ability to lower yourself to the floor from a standing position and rise again using as little support from hands, forearms, and knees as possible. Each use of support deducted half a point, or 1 point from a maximum score of 10. The finding was staggering and initially controversial. People who scored 3 points or lower were 5 to 6 times more likely to die from any cause within the study period than those who scored 8 or higher. The test predicted all-cause mortality more powerfully than blood pressure screening, cholesterol levels, or resting heart rate. It was a better predictor of death than most of the tests your doctor currently runs. Think about what that means. The ability to get off the floor is not just a party trick or a fitness vanity metric. It is a comprehensive, integrated measurement of your neuromuscular coordination, your hip and ankle mobility, your core stability, your balance system, your proprioceptive feedback, your body's real-time ability to know where it is in space and respond accordingly, and your ratio of body weight to functional strength. When those systems decline, everything else follows in sequence. Falls become catastrophic. Simple daily tasks become dependent on assistance. And for most Westerners, those systems begin declining silently and rapidly in their 40s because they almost never practice them. Not because of disease, not because of age, because the chair eliminated the daily challenge that kept those systems calibrated. Japanese seniors who live in traditional floor-oriented environments use these systems every single day, not in a formal exercise context, but as a consequence of how they live. The act of moving between standing, kneeling, and floor-seated positions requires your hip flexors, glutes, adductors, and deep spinal stabilizers to function as an integrated system. It requires your ankle joint to dorsiflex fully, heel staying on the ground as the shin moves forward over the foot, a capability that most Western adults lose entirely due to decades of chair sitting and restrictive footwear that immobilizes the ankle complex. When ankle dorsiflexion is restricted, the knee compensates by rotating inward. Then the hip compensates by shifting laterally. Then the lumbar spine compensates by extending excessively. And the whole kinetic chain collapses like dominoes in slow motion over years and decades, with chronic back pain, knee pain, and eventual joint replacement surgery, mistaken for the natural consequences of getting older rather than the consequences of never getting off the floor. The movement itself, going from standing to a deep floor position and back up, also demands eccentric muscle control on the way down and concentric power on the way up. Eccentric control, the ability to lower your body weight in a controlled, gradual manner against gravity, is the first physical quality humans lose with age if it is not specifically trained. It is more metabolically costly than lifting. It is more neuroprotective than lifting. And almost nobody in the Western world trains it intentionally, because almost nobody lowers themselves to the floor anymore. Japanese seniors retain it because they practice it involuntarily daily, without thinking of it as training at all. They are training it every time they sit down for dinner. I'll show you the precise technique for doing this safely, including a specific modification that allows someone with significant hip or knee restriction to begin immediately without pain. And there's one detail about where you position your weight during the descent. That makes the movement dramatically safer and dramatically more effective at building the stabilizing musculature around the knee. That's coming shortly. The third movement is the one that surprises people most when I describe it in detail, because on the surface it sounds almost too simple to matter. It's walking, but not the way you think about walking in the West. Walking in Japan is not a fitness activity with a start time and an end time. It's not 10,000 steps on a phone app. It's not a 30-minute cardio session that you schedule and then resent. It's the default mode of existence, the medium through which daily life is conducted. Japanese seniors walk to the market. They walk to the temple. They walk to visit neighbors. They walk to the local bathhouse. They walk slowly, deliberately, without destination anxiety, without earbuds canceling the world around them. They walk on varied terrain up stone staircases, across gravel temple paths, along uneven riverside walkways. And this distinction, varied terrain, deliberate pace, full sensory engagement, no distraction, is the key to everything. Here is what slow, deliberate walking on varied terrain does to the nervous system that a treadmill at the gym simply cannot replicate. Every time your foot contacts an uneven surface, your brain receives a cascade of proprioceptive signals from the mechanoreceptors embedded in the plantar fascia and the soft tissue of your foot sole. These signals travel up through the dorsal column pathway of your spinal cord to your cerebellum, the region of your brain responsible for coordinating movement, refining balance, and calibrating your postural control system in real time. The cerebellum processes this information and continuously updates motor programs, adjusting muscle activation across your entire lower body and trunk to keep you stable and upright. Every irregular step is, neurologically speaking, a learning event. Your cerebellum is being trained, refined, and maintained every single time your foot lands on ground that isn't perfectly flat. On a flat, predictable treadmill surface, this entire system goes mostly quiet. The mechanoreceptors in your feet send the same low-variation signal over and over. The cerebellum learns nothing new. The balance and coordination system maintains its current state without improving. And for an aging nervous system, the current state is not a fixed point. It is a slope. If you are not improving your balance system, you are declining. There is no stable plateau in neuromuscular aging. You are either challenging the system and maintaining competency, or you are not, and it is eroding. Japanese seniors who walk on natural terrain are running a continuous software update on their balance and coordination systems every single morning. This is a primary reason why falls, the single greatest cause of injury-related death and institutionalization in adults over 65 worldwide, are proportionally far less catastrophic in Japan's rural elderly population. Their nervous systems are not just functional, they are continuously maintained by daily environmental challenge. Their gaze stabilization is also better. The vestibulo-ocular reflex, the automatic mechanism that keeps your visual field stable when your head moves, is maintained and refined by movement over varied terrain in ways that smooth, predictable walking does not provide. When your head bobs and adjusts over uneven ground, your inner ear's semicircular canals and otolith organs send constant recalibrating signals to your eye muscles, keeping your vision stable and sharp during movement. This reflex, when poorly maintained, is a significant contributor to falls in the elderly. The world blurs momentarily during a stumble, and the person cannot correct in time. Japanese seniors who have walked on uneven terrain every day for 70 years have vestibulo-ocular reflexes that are sharper and faster than many 50-year-olds in sedentary Western populations. There's also something happening metabolically that most people overlook entirely. Walking at a moderate pace roughly 3 to 4 kilometers per hour, preferentially uses the aerobic fatty acid oxidation pathway for fuel, not the intense HIIT-style caloric burn that depletes glycogen, elevates cortisol, and inflames tissues during recovery, but the slow, steady, mitochondrial fat oxidation that preserves muscle mass, keeps blood glucose remarkably stable, and reduces visceral abdominal fat more consistently over time than any high-intensity protocol studied in populations over the age of 60. Japanese seniors have strikingly low rates of visceral adiposity, abdominal fat packed around the internal organs, and daily walking is a primary explanatory factor. Visceral fat is metabolically active in the worst possible way. It is physiologically toxic, and it responds beautifully to the slow, sustained, low-intensity movement that Japanese culture has embedded into daily life as unremarkable routine. Walking after meals deserves its own moment here because the evidence is extraordinary. A study published in Diabetes Care found that 3 short walks of 15 minutes each, after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, reduced 24-hour blood glucose levels more effectively than a single 45-minute walk at another time of day. The mechanism is direct. Muscle contractions during a post-meal walk activate a glucose transporter protein called GLUT4, which moves to the surface of muscle cell membranes and pulls glucose directly out of the bloodstream, independent of insulin. For people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, this is a profound finding. But even for people without diagnosed metabolic disease, consistently managing post-meal glucose spikes matters enormously over time. Every glucose spike drives glycation, the sugar-protein bonding process I described at the start, and every prevented spike is one less wave of molecular aging applied to your tissues. Japanese seniors who walk after dinner habitually, as a cultural norm rather than a medical directive, are managing their glycation burden every single day without knowing the chemistry behind it. Now we come to the fourth movement, and this is the one that will stay with you longest. This is the one that brings everything together. This is the one most directly linked to the vagal pathway I mentioned at the beginning, and it works through a mechanism so elegant and so deeply physical that once you understand it, you will wonder how it remained outside mainstream Western wellness for as long as it has. It is called Mako-ho, and almost no one outside Japan has heard of it. Mako-ho was developed in the 1930s by a Japanese man named Wataru Nagai, who suffered a severe stroke at 42 and was left with significant paralysis on one side of his body. The medical establishment of the time told him to rest and accept his limitations. Instead, he began a systematic daily program of floor-based stretching, focused on the 4 major meridian pathways of traditional Eastern medicine, which map with remarkable precision onto the 4 major fascial chains that modern Western anatomy, through the work of researchers like Thomas Myers, whose book Anatomy Trains became a foundational text in manual therapy, has identified as the primary tensional networks running through the human body. Nagai recovered full motor function within a year. He continued his practice and lived to 92 years old. The system he developed is now taught in Japanese elementary schools as part of physical education, practiced daily in nursing homes under the supervision of nursing staff, and recommended by Japanese geriatricians as a foundational component of elderly mobility and fall prevention programs. Mako-ho consists of 4 floor stretches, each held for 1 to 3 minutes with controlled breathing, targeting the anterior and posterior fascial chains of the legs and hips. The lateral fascial chain running from the lateral ankle through the perineal muscles up through the IT band, and lateral trunk to the lateral neck. And most critically, the deep front line. The deep front line is a fascial chain running from the inner arch of the foot up through the inner thigh, through the adductors, through the iliopsoas complex, the deep hip flexor muscle that connects the lumbar spine to the inner femur, up through the diaphragm, through the pericardium, and continuing through the fascia of the throat and face all the way to the base of the skull. Let me explain what this means for the aging body, because this is where it gets profound. Fascia is not passive packaging material wrapped around muscles to keep them from tangling. Fascia is a continuous, body-wide, tensioned web of collagenous connective tissue that runs through your entire body without a single anatomical interruption. It surrounds and interpenetrates every muscle, organ, bone, nerve, and blood vessel. It contains more sensory nerve endings, specifically mechanoreceptors called Ruffini endings and Golgi tendon organ-like structures embedded in the fascial planes, than your muscles do. It communicates postural and positional information to your central nervous system faster than your muscles do. It plays a direct role in proprioception, pain modulation, force transmission, and organ support. And when your fascia is well hydrated and mobile, all of these functions operate fluidly. When it dehydrates and stiffens, which happens through inactivity, chronic stress, inadequate hydration, and the normal fibroblast changes of aging, movement becomes restricted, pain sensitivity rises, proprioceptive accuracy declines, and organ function is mechanically compromised. Most chronic pain in older adults in the West is fascial in origin, not arthritic, not structural damage. Fascial, the tissue has become dehydrated, adhered, and sensitized. And conventional medicine, which images bones and counts inflammatory markers in blood, almost entirely misses this because fascia doesn't show clearly on X-ray or MRI and doesn't produce the blood markers we currently screen for. Patients are told their pain is their age, or their weight, or their posture, when the most accurate answer is that their connective tissue has been immobile for too long. Mako Ho directly addresses this through the mechanism of thixotropy. Thixotropy is the property of certain gels to become more fluid under sustained mechanical stress. Fascia exhibits thixotropic behavior. When you place fascial tissue under sustained, gentle tension, a stretch held for 90 seconds or longer, the ground substance of the tissue, primarily hyaluronic acid and proteoglycans, shifts from a more viscous, gel-like state toward a more fluid, mobile state. Think of it as the difference between cold honey and warm honey. The molecular structure hasn't changed, but the fluid dynamics have transformed entirely. The hyaluronic acid that lubricates the interfaces between fascial layers becomes less viscous, more evenly distributed, and more effective at reducing friction between adjacent fascial planes. The tissue glides rather than drags, and the mechanoreceptors embedded in the fascial layers, no longer compressed and distorted by accumulated tension, begin sending the clean positional signals to the nervous system that keep movement smooth and pain systems quiet. Now here is the connection to the vagus nerve that I promised you at the very beginning of this video. The deep front fascial line passes through and around the diaphragm, your primary breathing muscle, responsible for 70 to 80% of your inspiratory volume at rest. The diaphragm shares direct fascial continuity with the pericardium above it, and with the transversalis fascia and psoas fascia below it. The psoas, the deepest and most powerful hip flexor, originates from the lateral surfaces of the lumbar vertebrae and the intervertebral discs between T12 and L5. It is, anatomically, a neighbor of the sympathetic chain ganglia, the nerve clusters running alongside the lumbar spine that are part of your body's stress response system. When the psoas is chronically shortened and hypertonic, as it becomes in virtually every adult who sits for more than 6 hours a day, it creates sustained mechanical tension in the lumbar fascial environment that can increase sympathetic nervous system tone simply by proximity and tissue tension. This is one reason why people with chronic low back pain so consistently report also having elevated anxiety, poor sleep, and digestive irregularities. These are not coincidences. They are the neurological downstream effects of a chronically contracted deep front line. Mako Ho's stretching postures release this tension systematically and completely. The specific postures that open the inner thigh, decompress the psoas, and allow the hip flexors to lengthen directly, unload the deep front line from the plantar fascia of the foot all the way to the fascial attachments at the base of the skull. When this tension releases, the diaphragm regains its full range of motion. Each breath becomes deeper without additional effort. The mechanical compression on the fascial environment surrounding the vagus nerve, which runs adjacent to the esophagus, which is embedded in the deep front fascial chain, is reduced. Vagal tone rises. Parasympathetic activity increases. Cortisol drops. Heart rate variability, one of the most reliable biomarkers of cardiovascular health and nervous system resilience, improves measurably. Japanese seniors who practice Mako Ho before Radio Taiso every morning are performing a systematic nervous system reset before they begin their day. They are mechanically decompressing the physiological architecture of stress before stress has a chance to accumulate. The four movements together form a complete, integrated system. Mako Ho restores fascial mobility, decompresses the deep front line, and resets vagal tone. Radio Taiso activates the lymphatic system, lubricates every joint with synovial fluid, and continues the vagal stimulation through rhythmic breathing. Floor transitions maintain the neuromuscular coordination, eccentric strength, and ankle mobility that prevent falls and preserve independence. Walking on natural terrain refines cerebellar balance programs, burns visceral fat through aerobic lipid oxidation, and controls post-meal blood glucose through GLUT4-mediated cellular uptake. Each movement addresses a specific and distinct mechanism of physical aging. Together they address nearly all of them simultaneously, within 45 minutes every morning for free. Here is how to start. Not someday, not when you feel more ready, tomorrow morning. Wake up and before you check your phone, before you make coffee, get on the floor. Begin with Mako Ho. Sit with your legs straight in front of you, feet flexed, and reach toward your feet. Do not bounce, do not strain into pain. Find the edge of comfortable tension and hold it, breathing slowly for 2 full minutes. Then open your legs as wide as they comfortably go and reach toward each foot in turn for 2 minutes each. If you cannot reach your feet, reach toward your shins or your knees. The position does not need to be perfect. It needs to be held. Then bring the soles of your feet together in front of you. Let your knees fall outward toward the floor and hold for 2 minutes. If your knees hover far off the floor, place a folded blanket under each one and let the stretch work from where you are, not from where you think you should be. You have now addressed 3 of the 4 fascial lines in Mako Ho. Total time, 8 to 10 minutes. No equipment, no expertise required, just the floor and your willingness to be on it. Then stand up from the floor, using as little hand support as possible. Move deliberately. Take 10 seconds on the way up if you need to. Place one foot flat, drive through the heel, use your glute to extend the hip, and rise without crashing upward or grabbing for furniture. That controlled ascent, that single movement performed slowly and with intent, is your floor transition practice for the morning. 1 repetition, done. If you need to use a hand today, use it. Use less hand tomorrow. That is Kaizen. After the floor work, spend 10 to 12 minutes on Radio Taiso. There are English language instructional videos freely available showing the exact 13 movements with timing and breathing cues. Do not modify the movements. Do not try to make them harder. The genius of Radio Taiso is in its ordinariness. Medium effort, full range, every joint every morning. The consistency is the medicine, not the intensity. After breakfast, walk 20 to 30 minutes. If you have access to a park with gravel paths, a nature trail, a riverbank, a hillside, use it. If you only have urban sidewalk, walk it slowly. Keep your phone in your pocket. Let your eyes move naturally through the environment. Let your feet feel the subtle variations in pavement, curb cuts, and slope. After dinner, walk again. 15 minutes minimum. This is your most powerful daily intervention for blood glucose control, and the simplest thing you can do to begin reversing visceral fat accumulation. If you do nothing else from this video, walk after dinner every night. The research supports it. The mechanism is clear. The effort is minimal. The return is enormous. I want to leave you with something larger than a to-do list. The Japanese concept underlying all 4 of these movements is not wellness as a destination. It is not a body transformation project with a before photo and an after photo. The concept is called Kaizen, Continuous, incremental, non-dramatic improvement repeated daily without exception. The 94-year-old woman in Okinawa who outperforms the 60-year-old in Chicago is not exceptional. She is the accumulated result of 70 years of Kaizen, applied patiently to her body. She did not have a fitness awakening at 80. She never stopped at 40. She never required dramatic motivation, because she never stopped the practice long enough to need it. Small movements, every day, for a lifetime, the Western model of health says. Neglect your body until crisis forces your attention, then undergo extreme and often punishing effort to recover what you lost, then repeat the cycle. The Japanese model says, never stop moving in the first place. The effort required to maintain a living, mobile, functional body is always less than the effort required to recover one that has been abandoned. And recovery from decades of inactivity, once you are past 70, is not guaranteed. Capacity can be rebuilt, but not always fully restored. The window for easy maintenance closes progressively. But here is what the research will not let me leave unsaid. It is never too late to begin. Studies from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health show that mobility and balance interventions begun at 65, at 70, even at 80, meaningfully reduce the rate of functional decline, even when they cannot fully reverse existing losses. Your nervous system retains neuroplasticity well into advanced age. Your fascia responds to sustained stretching at 75 the same way it responds at 45, more slowly, but reliably and measurably. Your mitochondrial density begins improving within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent low-intensity daily movement. Your synovial fluid production responds to joint loading within days of beginning a regular full-range movement practice. The biology remains on your side if you will only move. Japan is not hiding a secret. 90,000 centenarians are not keeping a private practice. They are doing it in public parks, in community centers, in their own living rooms, every single morning before the rest of the world has opened its eyes. The reason most people in the West don't know about it is not because it's esoteric or ancient or inaccessible. It's because it's quiet. It's because it's unglamorous. It's because it doesn't require a credit card, a screen, or a subscription. And in a wellness industry worth over $1 trillion globally, quiet and unglamorous and free doesn't get a marketing budget, but it gets you to 90 with your own knees, your own balance, and your own mind intact. And at the end of your life, that is the only scoreboard that matters. Tomorrow morning, before coffee, 10 minutes on the floor, that is where 90,000 centenarians began, and it is where you begin now.